Okay, today we're going to start the Mishnah on Daf Zayin. The Mishnah starts off as similar. I'm going to bring that Chumash, the blue one over there. It's 27a. Okay, thank you. Okay, I think Hashem that you're able to learn every day. The schus of learning, we should have the basic English immediately. We're learning in the schus and the Lili Nishmas. Have a gold of Baruch Binyamin. And whoever needs a refuah shleima, have a refuah shleima. Okay. Morning. The pasuk says that you should not watch your brother's ox or sheep straying and turn a blind eye. You should return them to your brother. But if your brother is not near you, or if you did not know him, you should bring it into your house and it should remain with you until your brother seeks it out. That's adrei shachicha. You should return it to him. You should do the same with his donkey. You should do the same with his clothes. You should do the same with any lost property of your brother which he has lost and you have found. You should not turn the blind eye to it. Okay. Well, our Mishnah starts off with when it says about his clothes, we already said in the pasuk that you should do it for his lost item. For all his, it says with any lost property of your brother. So why does it have to specify the clothing? If clothing is just part of any lost property. Why is that set out as a detail? So the Gemara says, the Mishnah actually, it's coming to do a comparison. And it's coming to teach you that what type of items go under the category of the lost property of your brother are only things that are similar to the garment, or just like the garment. Obviously, someone made it, right? So it didn't come on its own. So it has an owner, and it also has simanim. It also has signs. It has identifying marks, and it also has someone that's going to claim it. So basically, there's two criteria to a lost item that needs to be taken to be and returned. Would be something that has identifying marks, and also something that has someone that's going to claim it. Yeah. What would be something that wasn't claiming would be two options. Either it wasn't made by it wasn't man-made, or something that would be given up. Someone would give up from it, would like be mafkir. Either side, either wasn't made by someone, or someone would give up right away. Okay.
If someone died and has no heirs, is that like
No, but here we're talking about the
lost it.
And here we're talking about the item,
right?
Not the person. Talking about the item. The item was made by someone. This was a man-made item. That means obviously it has an owner.
No, if the owner died, someone made it. He lost it, and then he disappeared.
Yeah.
And faced the earth and has no heirs.
Oh,
does that no claimant?
There's no such thing as someone that doesn't have any heirs, because he has relatives, but going back, someone else in the world is related to him.
It's
a convert.
A convert with no.
Yeah, so then it becomes hefker.
What's the asserting heirs?
No, but that's not just saying someone that doesn't have this is talking about the item doesn't have a claim on it. That would mean either man-made or things that people don't want. It could be. So we'll see in a moment. But we didn't mention it specifically an animal. So it says, "My bichlal kalelu." What does it mean included in all of these? Amarava Rava explains, it's included in all the lost objects of your brother. Amar Rava, Lamali the Kasrachman Ashar Chamar Seva Simla. Rava says, why does the pasuk need to specify the ox, the donkey, the sheep, and the garment? The Mishnah already told me about the garment. What about the other ones? So tzricha, it's necessary. This Kasrachman Simlifud only would have said the garment Havamina Hanim Lebedim de Gufa Vesimanim de Gufa. I would have thought that the Gemara is not specifying if witnesses work or if identifying marks work. The Gemara is giving me either option, but the identifying marks or the witnesses would need to be about the item itself. Aval chamar, but when it comes to a donkey, let's say someone says, I can't really tell you what the donkey looks like, but I can tell you what the saddle looks like and what the string that's on it looks like. It's like a car. I can't tell you what the engine looks like because I never saw that, but I can tell you what color the seats are. Something like that. So here I can tell you what color the saddle is. But does that mean that you have to give the donkey back just because he knows what the saddle is? Because Rahman Chamar, the pasuk writes, Eibishter writes in the Torah, Chamar, that you have to return the entire donkey just because the person claims the saddle. That means he knows the whole donkey. You have to return it. That's the chiddush of that extra word. Sure, we said the kas Rahman alamli. Why does it need to say an ox and a sheep and a lamb? For sure, that gives us nava. It's coming to tell me that even if you cut the hair off the tail, you still have to return that. It's an extra pasuk. It's coming to teach me there's a little bit of hair at the end of the tail that you have to return everything. And in the sheep, it's coming to tell me that if you shore, is that how you pronounce it? Past tense, to shear, to shore. Is that how you say it? Okay. If you sheared the wool, you have to
sheared.
If you sheared the
something is shorn, that's the object that's shorn. When you shear and you sheared and you will shear.
Uh-huh.
It's all sheared together.
Yeah. Okay. There's always this discussion. If I say smote, hika, it's to hit, to smite. If I say smote, it says there's no such word.
That's difficult.
It sounds like the selig gizaisav in the sheep is for its shearings. That if you sheared the wool, you have to return that as well. Okay. It's a very good question. Why don't you just say the bigger chiddush and you'll know the smaller chiddush automatically? If you have to return the little bit of wool that's at the end of the tail, then for sure you have to return all the wool that's on the sheep. See, an ox only has a drop of wool at the end of the tail, and the sheep is loaded with wool. Yeah. But you have to return that little bit. For sure you have to return the whole thing from the sheep. So why doesn't it just say that? Gemara answers, Rava doesn't really answer. It says, Chamar debar Rabbi Yehuda said David l'divrei kol kasha. We have two words in the Torah that we don't know how to explain. One is Chamar debar, the donkey, when it talks about the pit. If an ox or a donkey falls in. So when we learned Baba Kama, we learned that the ox tells me that Sharvale Yadam, an ox but not a man, that you don't have to pay for the death of a man in the pit. And then the donkey tells me Chamar v'le Kalim, and not vessels, right? You don't have to pay for vessels in a pit. Well, what about according to Rabbi Yehuda that says that you do have to pay for vessels that break in a pit? So what do you need the word Chamar for? So we don't know. That's a question. And now, what about the word Seh when it comes to the lost object? If you have Shor, you already know Seh. The Gemara says you're right, Kasha. Those are two words in the Torah that we don't have an explanation for. Probably in Kabbalah there's an explanation, but in the Gemara there's no explanation. The Gemara says maybe it's coming to tell me they have to return the manure, the fertilizer that it makes. It says glala mafkur mafkula. That's not true because the person for sure would allow anyone that's taking care of his animal to keep the glalim that it does. it would allow you to use that in your own fields. Maybe it's coming to tell me that you're allowed to use simanim. You see, we have a question here. I know you have to return. Shalom. Yeah, I know you have to return a lost item, but how do you know who the owner is according to the Torah? Is it the identifying marks or is it witnesses? Witnesses that can testify that you owned it. So when you come to the person that found it, you'd say, you'd have to bring your witnesses. So here we have an extra pasuk. This is coming to tell me that you don't need witnesses, that you can use an identifying mark, the bailan, because we actually had a question about this. Simanim deiraisa derabanan. When the fact that you can use identifying marks, is that the biblical law? Or is that just an institution of the rabbis? The rabbis instituted. You see, the rabbis can say, the court can say, sort of like an eminent domain, like they can say that just to keep society, everything functioning, that we return it like that. Maybe it's not really his. If he's just giving identifying marks, he's not bringing actual witnesses. Maybe it's not really his. The court can say hefker best in hefker. Well, so what? We made it his. For the rabbis can do that. So maybe the fact that simanim works, that's only rabbinic. But here we're going to say, no, we have an extra pasuk to teach me that you can use simanim. You can use a sign. Simanim deraisa derabanan kas rachman aseh. Simanim adjina v'simanim deraisa, that you can use simanim and that is deraisa. Gemara says Amri. The Gemara says like this: Midiktani l'tana l'simanim gabi simla. You see, it's very interesting when we mentioned in the Mishnah the clothing. We said, what's the clothing teaching me? It's coming to do a comparison. Just like clothing has simanim, identifying mark, and it also has an owner because it was man-made. Yeah, and also has an owner because it's man-made. So the fact that it's put into the Mishnah simanim, the Gemara says like this: Midiktani l'tana l'simanim gabi simla. Diktani masimli mechedesh yesa simanim v'yesh l'tayv. That has identifying marks. Also has someone that's claiming it. Echayv l'hachris. Af kol davar sheyesh bei simanim v'yesh l'tayv echayv l'hachris. So also anything that has identifying marks and it has someone that's claiming it, you have to call it out. Shema mina. We see from this the seh lav l'simanim hudasa. Obviously, the Mishnah is following a view that the sheep is not coming to teach me simanim because it already mentioned simanim by the clothing. So the Mishnah knows that says not teaching me simanim. What is it? What is that teaching me? The Mishnah doesn't know, or we don't know what is teaching me. We know it's not teaching me simanim because it puts simanim into the Mishnah when it's talking about the clothing. Now it's not so clear that it has to be like this because first of all, the Mishnah, when it says simanim, the Gemara is going to say it's not a real proof. See, we asked over here, we had a question. Is simanim deraisa derabanan? The fact that identifying marks are, that they work, is that a biblical law, is that a rabbinic law? The Gemara is going to mention this later. It says, well, it says in the Mishnah that simanim work, identifying marks. The Gemara is going to say, maybe that wasn't the main point of the Mishnah. Maybe it just threw that in, and it's not a biblical law. Maybe it just threw that in because it was mentioned something about taivim, about claiming it. It also mentioned about identifying marks. But that wasn't the main point of the Mishnah, and that's not what the Mishnah is really teaching me. So whatever the Mishnah is teaching me, we don't really know. Is it teaching me specifically identifying marks, or is it teaching me about claiming it? That's a little bit unclear. But whatever the case is, the Gemara is telling me here is that one thing I know for sure is that it's not learning simanim from Seh. That's all we're getting from this. Hillel had a question that when it says Tovim, Rashi said that it had to be man-made. It didn't come from Hefker. He says, what about the animals? The animals are not man-made. It could be they did come from Hefker. Yeah, I don't know. It's not so clear. I mean, it says clearly in the pasuk, so I don't have a question about that. But the fact that we're saying a rule that we're learning from the clothing, that it needs to be something that's that has someone that's claiming it. Maybe not every animal is maybe it comes from the wild. Are they wild sheep? A wild they have to be domesticated. Are they wild sheep? They're wild animals, wild goats, wild an actual wild animal, a deer, that type of stuff. So you don't have to return it. It lives in the wild. Maybe what it means is minastam, that it has a claimant, because the typical sheep or goat is going to have an owner. Typical domesticated animals are going to have it. That's probably what it means. Typically, it has an owner. Yeah. Okay. I probably have this question because I don't live on in the wild. Okay, Tanur Rabbanan was taught in the Brisa. Asher Teivad, we're going to go through the psukim. Well, not 100%, but it says over here that in the pasuk. So you should do the same with his donkey. You should do the same with his clothes. You should do the same with any lost property of your brother, which he has lost and you have found. Now, in the Hebrew, Asher Teivad Mimenu, which means that was lost from him, or that he has lost from him. Asher Teivad, that was lost. So, that's not Asher Nevad. Asher Teivad.
Translates to shall be lost.
Shall be lost. Shall be lost. Okay. Shall be lost and found. Umatzasa. Umatza. Shall be lost and you found it. Okay. Matzas and you found it. Okay, so it goes like this. Taner Rabbanan, Asher Toivad, which shall be lost. It has to be something that's significant, that at least has the value of a pruta. Pruta is the smallest coin. That's something that you would have to return. Rabbi Yehuda umatzasa, and you found it. Obviously, it has to have the value of the smallest coin, because if we're giving significance to it, you found it. It must be something that's at least has that significance. Might be now. What's the difference if I'm learning it from what you lost or from what you found? It needs to be that value. There is no difference. It just has to do with how they wanted to learn it out. Mar, the Tanakama, nafklem yasher toivad, learned from that you lost, or that shall be lost. Mar, and Rabbi Yehuda, nafklem sasa, from what, and you will find it. So the one that learns from Asher Teivad, which is the Tanakama, what does he do with the word, and you will find it, and you found it? What does he do with that extra word? So, he says that pasuk is teaching me by Rav Noi, like we learned from Rav Noi. This is on the first page of this Masechta. It says that you only have to return a lost object of your brother. You don't have to return a lost object that you found from a non-Jew. The Gemara asks, maybe that's only if you haven't picked it up yet. I mean, it belongs to a non-Jew. Maybe you're allowed to turn a blind eye to it and walk by it, and you don't have to pick it up. How do you know that if you actually picked it up, that you don't have to return it? Maybe once you pick it up, you do have to return it. So Rav Noi says, "Umatzasa," and you found it. It's coming to tell me that even if you already picked it up, you still don't have to return it. So we're learning from Matzasa that it's only your brothers that you need to return, not from a non-Jew. What about the other way? The Rabbi Yehuda that learns from Matzasa, what does he do with the words Asher Teivad, which means that was lost? What does he do with that pasuk? By like Rabbi Yechanan, he uses it for what Rabbi Yechanan teaches. Rabbi Yechanan, possibly Rabbi Shimon ben Yitzadok. Rabbi Yechanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, how do you know that a lost object that got washed away by the river, that it's permissible for you to keep. Shenemar, it says in the pasuk, so you should do for any lost item from your brother that was lost from him and it was found. It has to be lost only from him, but it's still accessible to everyone else. But if it's lost from everyone, for example, it got washed away by the tide, so that's totally lost. So it's not accessible to anyone. That you don't have to return. If you find that, you can keep it. Yeah. Back this $20 bill. Okay, so that's what he's going to learn from Ashetayvad, the one Rabbi Yehuda. The other opinion, Hadar Rav Naim Minalei. This is Rabbi Yehuda. It's funny how it says V'idach, because we're talking about him. What does he do? How does he know the teaching of Rav Nai that we just taught that only if it's lost by a Jew you have to return it, not if it's lost from a non-Jew. Nafkalei mi vimatzasa. It's actually umatzasa, the extra vav. V'idach. What about the Tanakama? The Rabbi Yochanan Minali. How does he know what Rabbi Yochanan says? That says that only if it's lost specifically from him, but not if it's lost to everyone, you have to return it. If it's lost to everyone, you're allowed to keep it. How does he know that? So nafkale mimenu. He learns it from the word not from Mashatayvad, but from mimenu. V'idach, and Rabbi Yehuda himself would say mimenu le mashmalei. That you can't teach me anything. It's not strong enough. Yeah.
He doesn't have to pick it up if it doesn't belong to church.
Right.
And how would he know if it does or it doesn't?
If he saw it falling from a non-Jew. The non-Jew sitting there, the non-Jew gets up and walks away. Or if it says, the guy's name, Christian crucifix. Right.
And if he didn't see the person or it has no name, how would he know if it's Gentiles?
Then he would have to. It could be it's a Jewish person.
Yeah. Would you go by the community, mostly Jewish?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I'm not sure. We know if there's a lot of traffic there, that makes a difference according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, right? But maybe there's a place where there's not a lot of traffic. Found it in a taxi. I don't know. Okay. Now, the answer that we just got was Abaya's answer. He made a difference between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. That his difference is that there's no difference. It just depends on which pasuk you want to learn it from. Yeah, that's his answer. That's his. Rava Amar Pruta shows like a benayo. Rava says no, there is a real difference here between the two opinions. The difference is that if it started off having value when he lost it, but then when he found it, it didn't have the value of a pruta. So if you learn from Ashetayva that was lost, so then okay, you have to return it because when it was lost, it had a value. You learn from when you find it, matzasa, then it doesn't have a value. So it goes like this. Manda Ashetayva, according to the first opinion, which is the Tanakama, it had a value. Manda matzasa leka, according to the second opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't have value. But 1 second. Everyone agrees what it says in the pasuk. The pasuk says in Matzasa, you found it. What did you find? You found nothing. Must be it's the opposite. You're going to hear the same problem. The opposite is that it started off, it didn't have a value, but then when you found it, it increased. Manda Amar Matzasa Ika. It was those comic books. The older they get, the more precious they get, something like that. The collector's things, stamps maybe. Mandam Tsasa Ika, Mandam Mashatay Beleka. So when he found it, it had value. But the one according to the opinion that says when he lost it, it didn't have value. You don't have to return it. 1 second, everyone agrees what the pasuk says. It says that he lost it. Obviously, he would have to lose something that was significant, not something that he lost that was insignificant. So you hear what's going on? Talking about something that had value when it was lost, then it lost its value, and then it went back in price. It's like stocks. Manda Marshataivarika. Manda Matzasa being on the Ispeshia Metzia, Mishasavid, Mishas Metzia. The Ravas would be claiming like this. This is according to the one that says that it needs to be when it lost, that it had a value. Okay, so good. When you lost it, it had a value. One that says when you found it, he's coming to tell you that it needs to have its value from the time that it was lost until the time that it's found. Oh, okay, this didn't have that. This you can keep it. Because in the middle, it lost its value. Okay. Ibailahu came up with the difference. Rava came up with the difference between the two opinions. Ibailahu, Simanim deraisa derabanan. The concept of returning an object with a identifying mark, is that a biblical law or is that a rabbinic law? Now, the Gemara mentioned this before, that we had a question about this, but we didn't go through the discussion. Here's where the discussion is. My nafkamina, what's the difference? You have to return it anyway. La dure gedisha b'simanim, to return a divorce document. If you see if there's witnesses about this, then it would be no problem. You return it. But if there's no witnesses, we had a whole discussion about returning a get that was lost because we're concerned that maybe it wasn't the original get, maybe it wasn't written lishma. We always needed witnesses to tell me that this was written lishma. The get has special halachas. So if we said that if it was lost for a long amount of time, it wasn't supposed to be used. If it was lost just for a short amount of time, you could still use it. Anyway, but let's say there's simanim that say, oh, this is exactly the one that I lost. If we say that simanim work, that identifying marks work biblically, then madrina, and then you can return the get to the woman. Or not to the woman, you could return it to the husband to use it, or to the shliach to use it. If you say it's rabbinic, maybe the rabbis only said that simanim work because they have the ability to say hefker best in hefker, to make something ownerless at their own discretion, and so therefore they can say that even though biblically this item should not be returned, but the rabbis can say, well, so what? We're confiscating it and we're giving it to him. They can only say that by monetary matters. They don't say that by ritual law. Well, Tashima, come and listen. It says, quote our Mishnah. It says clothing that was included in all the lost items of your brothers. Why was it specified? To do a comparison, to tell you, just like clothing, which is specific, that it has, which is unique, because it has signs, and it also has a claimant, right? And you have to announce it. So to anything that has signs and has a claimant, you have to announce it. See, it says signs. We're learning it from the Simla. It says Tana Tevim Mitzrichli Simanim Kedinaspa. What the Tana was really trying to tell you was that it has a claimant. It said signs, identifying marks. That just said in passing, just to fill up the space. Yeah. Yeah. In the Mishnah? No, we're quoting the Mishnah here. So the Tana put this extra, yeah. Even in the Mishnah, there shouldn't be any extra words. But what it means, what Rashi says, is that Kedin Aspa doesn't just mean to fill up space. It means that the rabbis attached it to this pasuk, but it doesn't mean that it's a biblical law. Put it as there as a smach. Okay. Tashema Chamar b'Siman Yokef says that you return the donkey in the brisa that we had right after the Mishnah. Turn the donkey with signs about the saddle. See, you can use signs. Ema be'edi yokef. No, we'll say that really meant the witnesses. If you look at the Brisa, it says signs as well. But anyway, somehow it's ignoring that. Come and listen. It says in the pasuk that it should be with you until your brother claims it. How are you going to give it to him before he claims it? Right? You need the person to come and show up and say that it's his. Rather, it doesn't mean that until he claims it, but what it means is that you darshehu until he is examined, until you examine him to see if he's a liar or not when he shows up. And how do you know if he's a liar? My labasimanim. You see if he gives signs that identifies the item. So you see, signs are going to work biblically. It says loy beidim. It's talking about find out if he's a liar based on witnesses, or witnesses can maybe tell us that it's his, not tell us that he's a liar. It could go either way over there.
So is witnesses reading the signs or just witnesses?
So the witnesses can actually identify it based on recognition. That's a good point, though, because if witnesses know it by the signs, then I would still have a proof that signs work.
Yeah.
So witnesses have to know it better than signs.
If the witnesses say, "Oh, we got the signs," but the witnesses are liars.
No, well, we don't assume that witnesses are liars. Usually, two witnesses we assume are not liars. One would be a problem, yeah. Okay, so the Gemara says, "Be'edim." Edim are going to tell us now. The Edim, according to Rashi, are going to tell us that it's his. According to other commentaries, would tell us that it's Edim would tell us that he's not a liar. Tashima, yeah, you have a question? Huh?
The witnesses testify that the object belongs to the claimant, and then the Hanana, or the Rama was saying that the witnesses testify to the person's character.
Very good. Very good. Hill tells me in the notes, it's quotes Rabbeinu Hananel saying that they're testifying about his character. I have that on the note on the side I have from the Balamar. Quoting the Rambam. Okay, I have a Rabbeinu Hananel on my Gemara. Let me just see if that's Ramban. I don't see that actually. Okay, don't worry, it's fine. It's
You click and then you can see the sources. The sources are usually like in Hebrew.
you want to show me? No, it's popped up and disappears. They're hiding it from me. But the Ramban they're quoting, Rabbeinu Hananel it doesn't exist. Okay. Oh, it's the Ramban quoting Rabbeinu Hananel. Eidim should serve me Rabbanan, but I don't see it in our Rabbeinu Hananel. Maybe it's here. Maybe it's just not in this place where on this page. Yeah. See, when you click on it, you'll see what I'm saying. Okay. Where are we holding? Tashma. Come and listen. Talking about testifying that someone died so that his wife can get remarried. See what I'm saying over there? Can you click on it? The Ramban opens out but Rabbeinu Hananel doesn't. The reason why they put Rabbeinu Hananel is because the Ramban quotes Rabbeinu Hananel. The reason why Rabbeinu Hananel doesn't open up is because it may not be in our Rabbeinu Hananel. So it's not in our text. So they were testifying about someone that died so his wife can get remarried. Well, what would be a sign to know that this is the person that's the guy that's the husband. How do you know? How do you know who he is? It says, well, you have to look at his face. You have to see a face that has a nose. Doesn't have the nose, then you can't really tell. So it has to be a face with the nose. Even though we know we can have identifying marks on his body, or on his clothing. So you see, even though those identifying marks are there, but that's not satisfactory. It can't just be regular identifying marks, a birthmark or something. That's not good enough. It needs to be actually see his face. You see, everyone agrees that a siman movak is going to work. Yeah, it has to be, or else how do you know anything? It has to be that a very clear identifying mark, like your name on your wallet or on your license or whatever. It has to be very, very clear identifying marks are proof. It's just things that are not so identifying, but nevertheless, you happen to know about it. Oh, it had a string hanging from the back. Okay, whatever. Amri, so they say like this. Gufa, the reason why those identifying marks aren't good is not because identifying marks aren't good, it's because the identifying marks that it's referring to are not specific enough, because the identifying marks in his body is the aruch v'gutz. So it's saying that he's long, or gutz means short, right? Tall or short. So big deal. That's the proof. It had to be him because it was tall or short. That's not a way to, hope they don't use that in court for anything. It had to be him because it was tall. No, that's not enough. Caleb, and what about his garments? He says, no, that's chashin l'shayla. Could be borrowed someone's jacket. I forget the exact story, but there was a Marcus Lehman book where they're trying to identify someone, and it wasn't the person, it wasn't the husband, but it was clear the guy was sure that it was him because the clothing was his. But in the story, it was like a novel. In the story,
isn't that the book of Itamar?
Maybe, yeah, Itamar, yeah. I read it so long ago. But anyway, in there, he had borrowed someone else's clothing exactly like this Gemara. And it wasn't very good. Yeshakayach Ramesha for your Bikias.
Right.
There's a famous case, second thing, that the guy got off because the glove didn't fit.
Oh yeah. The glove, yeah. What do they say about the glove? If it doesn't fit, you must quit or something.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's not specifically this, but I hear. So Ichashin l'shayla. 1 second. If we're worried about borrowing, Chamar b'simani yokev hekamadrina. How come the Mishnah before said with the simani yokev, with the signs of you return a donkey because it has signs on the saddle? Maybe you borrowed the saddle. Now you're returning a whole donkey because of a borrowed saddle. It says Amri ukif leishuli, people don't lend out their saddle. Ukif, the saddle leishuli and people don't lend out mishum misakiv leilachamra, because it bruises the animal if you take a saddle from another animal. The problem is that it doesn't fit perfectly, and then it stretches it, and then you put it back, and this it ends up ruining. It's like they say not to borrow shoes. Did they ever tell you that as a kid? Not to borrow someone's shoes. That's what they told. They say you can wear other people's clothing, but not to wear their shoes. And like the shoes sort of stretch to your foot. Anyway, something like that with the saddle. Yeah. Maybe that's why you should never do it, because you can't walk in your shoes because you're not allowed to. My grandmother doesn't let. Okay, Iba Yasema. If you want, you can say another answer. Kalev b'chivri v'sumki. Clothing is with white and red, which is also not a sign. It doesn't have to be borrowed, the issue. Just be white and red clothing. Okay, you had a white shirt. Yeah, okay, everyone has a white shirt. Elo hadatanya, rather what was taught in Bryson Matsu Kasher Bekis, if you find a document, the get, that's tied to a purse, a barnaki, another type of purse, with tabas or a ring. Shematsu ben Kalev, or he finds it amongst his utensils. I feel as man meruba, even if it was for a long time. This is what we said about a get. If you lose it for a small amount of time, you can use it. But if the shliach loses it for a long amount of time, then he can't use it. But if it's found amongst his utensils, then it's kosher. But if we're concerned that maybe he borrowed it, kosher bekis, maybe he borrowed that wallet, maybe he borrowed all of those things that it's found. Maybe it's not really his, it's not the same one. People don't lend out wallets and purses and rings. They don't lend out their wallet because Rashi says because they can do magic with it, and yeah, they can ruin his good luck. Yeah. Then if it wasn't for bad luck, he wouldn't have any luck. Yeah, but nevertheless, it's like a superstition. Yeah. But tabas mishum de mezayef and the ring, because people can use it to sign things that you don't want. You don't want to lend out your ring. Okay. Lema ketanai. This discussion we could say maybe is a machlekes, an earlier machlekes. The machlekes regarding if signs are biblical or rabbinic, identifying marks. It says ein me'idim ala shuma. If you're trying to testify that a woman could get remarried based on the death of her husband, now you see there's how do they translate a shuma? It's a type of like not a wart. It says a wart. Yeah, he has a wart somewhere on his body, and they say, it has to be him because he has the wart, that identifying mark. The Gemara says you can't use a wart. Elazar ben Mavai, Elazar ben Mavai says you can use a wart. My lab bakamiflagi, must be that this is a machlekes. Tanakama service simanim derabanan. Tanakama that says you can't use the wart as a sign, that's because simanim is rabbinic. Elazar ben Mavai service simanim deraisa. He holds that no, that is a good enough sign, and therefore you can use it. Amar Rava. Rava says the kuliyama simanim deraisa vacha b'shuma Metzia ben gili kamiflagi. Rava says everyone really holds that simanim are biblical, possibly, but here a wart. It could be that a wart is found on someone that has the same constellation as you. Now, this would mean that a person that's born on the same constellation, under the same sign, zodiac, so then maybe he has the same type of birthmarks exactly like you. So one person with one opinion holds, Tanakama holds that no, this can't be identifying mark because maybe that's exactly the guy that was born in the same constellation, and therefore he has the same warts. Another one says that no, just because he's born in the same constellation doesn't give him the same warts. Yeah. Daniel, what was that story with this? I think it was like a Hemingway or something. This lady had a birthmark, and she's married to this scientist, a doctor or something. It tries to get it away, and it gets smaller and smaller, and then she dies when it disappears or something.
Right? I don't know. Sounds familiar.
Okay, Iba Yasema. If you want, you can say the Kuli Alma Shuma Ina Metzia Ben Gilei. It doesn't work like that. It's not just because the same constellation doesn't mean they have the same words. We have another question. Do we say that after a person dies, different warts appear and or warts disappear? The things change on the body after death. So the Tanakama holds can't use a wart as an identifying mark because after death things look a little different. Things in the body adjust and it changes. Other one says that no, the signs stay the same after death. If you want, you could say the nothing changes after death, but simanim are only rabbinic. Question is, if a shuma, if a word is a very clear identifying sign, which we said that everyone agrees works. One opinion says that that's clearly a siman muvak, that's like DNA. Other one says that shuma is not a siman muvak. Rava says, if we say that simanim are not biblical, so how are we allowed to return a lost item? A lost item. Now, the rabbis can institute it. But the Gemara's question is, why did the rabbis institute it if it doesn't have a biblical source? Why did they actually institute this? The Gemara answers, they want that the one that finds it should return it with signs. Because when he loses something, well, actually, what it's saying over here is the one that finds the item wants to return it with simanim, because when he loses something, he would like to get it back with simanim. Does a person do a kindness with money that's not his? I think what the Gemara is asking is, what do we care what the finder thinks? Well, what we should care about is what the loser wants. Does the one that lost the item want it to be returned with simanim? Ella, rather we have to say this differently. The one that lost the item, he wants that sign should be able to be given to be taken. Made the other, he knows he doesn't have witnesses. He thinks that no one in the world knows the exact simanim, the perfect simanim. I'll be able to give the signs and get it back. So he doesn't want it to be so tight, because then he won't be able to get it back either. So even the person that lost the item is willing to have simanim being used. Allah Ditnan, 1 second. We have a Mishnah. Shimon ben Gamliel says, someone borrowed from 3 people. We found a promissory notes that one borrower, Shimon, borrowed from Ruvain, Levi, and Yehuda. So Yachzel Alayva, because they're all tied together, all in. So obviously it was Shimon that borrowed it. There's 3 people that borrowed from Shimon. Ruvain, Levi, and Yehuda borrowed from Shimon. Then you return to the lender, which is Shimon. So according to you, you're telling me that the person wants it to be returned. Now the person that lost it over here is the borrower. You think the borrower really wants the documents to be returned to the lender? He's going to use them to collect. Over there, I don't need the logic that because the person wants it to be returned. And then, in other words, that's a good logic for a regular, typical item. Over here, I don't need that logic. Over here, I have a different logic. I have Echad Alev Mishleis Yachsalev, the Gabi Leiva Shchichi, Gabi Mavel Shchichi. It would be very odd for all these 3 different people to have all their documents put together, as opposed to the one borrower, he has his documents all together. Shema Mina, Miloi Venafel. Was a difficult word to read. Obviously, it fell from the borrower. Looks like Malva. But 3 people borrowed from one person, one lender. So then you return it to the lender. It would be not practical that all of those documents ended up all together, even though it's from 3 different people. But this that was taught in the Mishnah. If you find it held in a some sort of satchel, what does it say over there? A bundle. Oh, this was a roll or a bundle. Remember that? Of documents. You have to return it. This is not because there's 3 documents and you have a svara. Here you're returning it just because of the sign. You're returning it because of the sign that's on it, because he says how it's rolled or whatever. Now the Rava says simanim are actually a daraisa. It's biblical law. It says it should be with you until your brother claims it. Does it enter your mind that you give it to him before he claims it? Rather, you have to seek out him to see if your brother that's coming to claim it, if he is the liar. And how do you seek that out? That's by him giving signs. Now, before we said that maybe not, maybe he brings witnesses. But the Gemara here is just ignoring that and saying that this would be the correct way of reading it. Shema Mina, you see from this that Simanim are daraisa. Amar Rava, imtim tzalem Simanim daraisa. Rava says, if you're going to say the Simanim is daraisa, that's identifying marks are biblical. Gemara says, 1 second, imtim tzalaimar. If you're going to say, hapashali Simanim daraisa, you just said that it is. Mishum diklameimer kedushanina. Gemara says, well, it's not 100% because you can still go back and say, as we answered before, that maybe it's referring to witnesses that are coming to testify that either to his character, like you said, Hillel, or it's coming to testify that the item belongs to him. Simanim v'simanim. Let's say one person gives signs, another person gives signs. Yaniach, you can't give it back. That's confusing. Wait for Eliyahu Navi to come. Simanim ve'edim, signs and witnesses. Yinasan l'bal edim, you give it to the one that has the witnesses. That's stronger. Simanim v'simanim ve'edachad. Let's say signs and one witness. Edachad command less adam v'yaniach. One witness is nothing, and it's still just like signs and signs. Idi ariga ve'edin nefila. One person has witnesses that he wove it. The other one has witnesses that he dropped it. Yinasan l'ed nefila, give it to the one that he dropped it, because could be damrina zvuni zavnim yenashachin nafal. Could be just because he weaved it doesn't mean that he owns it. Could be he sold it, right? Midas arka midas rachbay. Its length and its width. Tinasan midas arka. The one that has the length, that's better. The midas rachbay shir kamashale kad mechasile mara v'koi. Midas arka le mishtarle. Person can sort of estimate a person's width, but he can't estimate his height. I'm not sure why. Well, you can estimate his height, but it doesn't mean you can estimate the height of the garment. So it could be, it needs to be a little bit longer because of his width. And the width you can estimate as is, doesn't have to do with his height. As the width is less dependent on his height, but the height is dependent on his width. The length of it, because if it stretches out, it has to go, it's longer.
So a skinny, obesity here. So you have a short man who's very fat. That's identifiable.
No, you can identify the length of a big man's talus. Yeah, you can identify the waist size.
Right.
Not necessarily can you identify the height, because sometimes they need it longer because if it's wider, it takes more. Okay. Midas arka, midas rach, by length and width, midas gamav, or the square material. If he says the square footage of it. So yinasan midas arka v'rach, by you, the one that knows the length and the width, that's better than just knowing the square amount, right? Midas arka, midas rach, midas mishkaleisa. Let's say one knows the length and width, one knows the weight. Yinasan midas mishkaleisa, give to the one that knows the weight. Who are Mr. Money get? Who are Mr. Money get? If they both have the sign, then you give it to her on the get, because he has the sign. I know because he was the one that had it written. But how does she get? How does she know it? Obviously, it was given to her, so it must be that she was divorced already. But what are we talking about? If it's the length and width, maybe she saw it while he was holding it. We're talking about a different sort of sign. The sign was that there's a hole next to a certain letter that she wouldn't have been able to see unless she had already received it. The get was tied with a string. So each of them are saying that sign. You know, like give it to her. If it's the white string or red string, maybe she saw it while he was holding it, that she knows the color. We're talking about the length of the string. If it was in some sort of folder or something, and he says it's in a folder, she says it's in a folder, you give it to him, not to her. Why? My time, I made the yada, the koma disli bechavisa, the manachna. She knows her husband, now her ex-husband, but maybe still the husband. She knows that he always likes to carry his things in a briefcase. He's a briefcase type of guy. So attaché case, right? So the fact that she's saying that he has it in his attaché case, that doesn't mean that she actually received the get. It could be she just knows his character, that he always keeps his things in there. Okay. Leave it over here. We're at the Mishnah. Have a good day, everyone.